We live in a world that glorifies hustle, but what if the most powerful thing you could do for your success is to pause, reflect, and listen? Welcome back to Faith and Focus, a companion podcast to the TSA Weekly podcast, designed specifically for Christian business owners, helping us to seek God in everything that we do in our business. But before we dive into this, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that little notification bell so that you never miss a tutorial or upload. So speaking of the TSA Weekly podcast, if you haven't watched it yet, I am taking a short break from both TSA Weekly podcast and Faith and Focus podcast. If you want to understand all the reasons why I'm doing that and what's coming next and all of that, make sure you go and watch that episode. But essentially, I'm not taking a step back. I'm not stopping either of the podcasts. I'm just taking a step forward towards being a little bit more intentional with both. And that's what I kind of want to talk about a little bit here today as well. We are called to work diligently, right? But we're also called to trust God, seek God, and listen for God's direction. So this week, I wanted to take just a couple of minutes to talk about reflection and intentionality in your business. And of course, we will be turning to the Word, bringing up a couple of different verses here for you to hopefully read along with and maybe journal on this week in your business. The first thing I want to talk about here is the importance of seeking God's guidance before taking big steps. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about every tiny step that we make in our business. I'm talking a little bit more about the ones that are potentially direction changing. Not that it's not absolutely beneficial to listen to God's direction for every step that we take, but when we're talking about more in those big, possibly like pivot moments, I want to look at Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6, which is a very popular, well known verse. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." That reflection, especially the type of reflection that goes along with prayer and spending time in God's word, it's not about overanalyzing. It's not about overthinking things. We've talked here before about, the importance of messy action and done is better than perfect and not getting stuck in that analyzing phase of our business. I just want to encourage you to really think about reflection more about trusting God to guide your next steps and less about, holding on and waiting until you figure out the exact perfect next step. You don't have to take all that responsibility on your own shoulders. You can work with, as we've said before, the ultimate business mentor to help guide you in the direction that he's designing for you to go in with your business. The second verse we're going to look at is actually in Zechariah, which is not one that we go to very often, but Zechariah 4:10. "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." This really relates to what I was talking about in the TSA Weekly podcast this week, where we're talking about not only celebrating specific milestones, those discipline-based milestones as opposed to results milestones, but also micro improvements, taking little steps, making 1% improvements, atomic habits, all that good stuff. That's what Zechariah is kind of talking about here. It's not just that God celebrates these big, huge moments, which he absolutely does. When you make a big sale or you land a big client, God is 100% celebrating alongside of you. But he celebrates more our faithfulness in showing up. And he celebrates the small little wins that we achieve along the way, even more so than those big things. He celebrates all those little ones. And it's important that we remember to celebrate along with him. And like I said in TSA Weekly podcast, part of the reason that I am taking a little break from the podcasts is to reflect and to kind of, I don't want to say reimagine, but just to give some intentionality around both podcasts and why I'm here and what I'm talking about. But also because I want to make sure I avoid burnout. And I've talked before about the Sabbath. We've talked about the importance of rest and strategy in your business. And this is something that God addressed as well. In Mark 6:31, Mark says, "Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he," meaning Jesus, "said to them, 'Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest.'" Even Jesus, okay, his mission was far more important than my mission. And I hate to break it to you, but far more important than your mission Even Jesus knew that he needed to take time to rest and recharge and make sure he had enough energy. I mean, he was human. He might have been Jesus, but he was still human. He had a human body that needed to sleep and needed to eat and needed all the same things that we need in order to be able to show up the way that we want to show up for our audience, for our clients. He needed, in fact, even more so, he needed that rest. And so did his disciples. He absolutely understood the importance of taking that time to step back and rest and recharge. And he knew that taking that step back, it's not a setback. It was never a setback. In fact, it's wisdom. What's actually foolish and what ends up being a detriment to your business is just continually moving forward without ever stopping. Because not only do you need the rest, but you lose some of your intentionality along the way. I just want to encourage you to make sure that you are setting aside intentional time, not just your morning routine or your daily devotional with God, but I'm talking about periodically taking extra time set aside to stop and pause and reflect and listen for the direction that God is trying to give you. So if you're feeling stuck or uncertain or just plain exhausted, then maybe it is time for you to take a step back from something. Pray, seek God's direction, and then you can press forward. So I invite you to join me during this hiatus from the podcast to just reflect on these verses, journal about it, pray, and seek God's direction for the next season of your business. And let me ask you a question before we go. What is one way that you can be more intentional about your next steps? Let me know in the comments. I hope this episode encouraged and inspired you. And if it did, please share it with another Christian business owner that could use the same encouragement. Thanks for being here. God bless you and your business. See you in the next episode.